Again, I just want to welcome everyone to our second AUW California DEI Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chat, statewide chat. We are thrilled to be able to host this space and have an opportunity to engage in this webinar and community and conversation with you around justice, accessibility, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity. And I just have to say, just saying those words, how powerful they are, and what they evoke. I look forward to what's going to emerge from tonight's discussion. And I know our speaker, our guest speaker, who is very well connected to not only AAUW California, but AAUW Santa Maria branch, will do a phenomenal job in engaging us in this conversation and strengthening our understanding around these definitions, these concepts, and most importantly, how we can integrate the themes into our specific within our local branches, within AUW California, and also our respective roles, whether we're working or a part of other community organizations, or really just engaging with other individuals around issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll actually read Dr. Murthy's bio in just a minute, but I'll go ahead and advance to the next slide because I'd like to share a little bit about the work of, first agenda, what we'll be talking about. So I mentioned justice, accessibility, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity, why it's important to AUW. We'll have the opportunity for you to ask questions, respond to some prompts that Dr. Murthy will provide, and then we'll close us out. I would like to share a little bit about who the DEI, AUW California DEI Committee is in our work. So next slide. So heartfelt thank you to our 2022-2023 AAUW California DEI Committee. These are the folks that are actively engaged monthly in conversations around these issues, really trying to support the branches, support us statewide in this work. I can confirm that they're passionate individuals as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We continuously are doing the learning and having conversations around what this looks like on a personal level, professional level, and then organizational level. So thank you to Barbara and Kathy, Lenore, Charmin, Elaine, Patrice, and Deborah, who I think many of them are actually here in the space. And I hope you will look to us as resources. Ask us questions at Diversity at AUU California. If there are things related to your branch activities, or perhaps you're in an, let me just step back and say, I think we have some attendees from other states as well. So we would love to engage with you as well and see how we might be able to support in this work. It really is a collective effort. Next slide. So what are some of the things that we're hoping to do as part of the DEI committee and support to you? Empower you through mentorship, personalized support, these community conversations, providing brave and safe spaces to discuss and explore these concepts, understanding that we're all sitting in different places in terms of understanding, and that's okay. It's welcomed, and this is the space to do the learning, right? We develop and share resources that continue to expand our learning wherever we are, right? There are great national resources. We have this recording, and that will be posted on our website, in addition to our first DEI statewide chat, and more resources that will come in the future. And really looking at equity is really rooted in accountability as well, holding branch leaders accountable, branch members accountable to doing this work, because it really does align with the AUW mission when we think about advancing equity for women and girls. Next. So this is just a bit about, what you can expect from us. There's probably going to be one more, maybe two DEI statewide chats in the coming months. We have an upcoming peer group space for individuals who are serving in the capacity of DEI branch director or coordinator. We've had one of these Let's Talk DEIs facilitated by Barbara and Lenore, and we plan to have another one in the next month or so. and sharing relevant resources and training. We want to hear from you. We should assume that all of us may have information and access to resources that would benefit others. And so if you have something that would be beneficial to us, please share with the committee, and perhaps we can disseminate that statewide. There's the one-to-one support, because we know within our respective communities and our branches, there may be different things emerging. You might want to reach out and just ask how to work through things. Outreach, we're available if you ever want us to come to an IBC meeting, participate in that space, or an event. Please do look at the DEI committee to support in that capacity. If not myself, another one of our wonderful DEI committee members might be able to step into the space and support. Next slide. Oh, that might be my last slide. And if it is, and that's okay, because I want to now take the opportunity to, that's just about all the talking that I'm going to do, a little bit here and there, but largely this is an opportunity for us to hear and learn from Dr. Lata Murthy. Dr. Lata Murthy is Associate Professor of Sociology for the School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Massachusetts Global. She led the revision of the Bachelor of Arts in Sociology program, designing a competitive and cutting-edge curriculum with practical and professional relevance. The recipient of UMass Global's 2015 Outstanding University Faculty of the Year Award, Dr. Murthy has received recognition for both her pedagogy and her publications from organizations such as the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, the National Center for Institutional Diversity, and Universal Publishers Dissertation.com, which selected her dissertation on the racial experience of Indian immigrant doctors for its 2015 Annual Excellence Award. Dr. Murthy holds an MA and PhD degrees in American Studies and Ethnicity from the University of Southern California. She has presented at numerous conferences related to teaching and sociology, in addition to publishing on these topics for several peer-reviewed journals, the Sage Research Methods Cases Collection, Asian American Society, an encyclopedia, and the Work in Progress blog of the American Sociological Association. And again, Dr. Murthy is the current co-president of the AUW Santa Maria branch, so welcome to the AUW community. It's such a privilege to be able to be in the space with you, Dr. Murthy. I so look forward to learning from you. I'm sure our 57 participants are feeling much the same. That's why we're all here. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Lata Murthy to introduce the concepts of justice, accessibility, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity.
Thank you so much, Stormy, and thank you all for taking time out of your Monday evening to be here tonight. I hope you find it worthwhile and that you take away some things that will help you and help your branches as well, and AAUW as a whole. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a presentation to share with you today. And let's make sure that it pops up here. All right. Let me know if you cannot see this, but I'm assuming you can. And if you see me turning to the side and you see the side of my face, it's because I'm working on two screens and I'm looking at my camera on one screen. I've got the presentation on the other. So let's talk about JABBED. It's all of those things that Stormy just mentioned, and I put it into an acronym, JABBED. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and break it down in a few seconds. But I pronounce it JABBED, and this is my own acronym. I coined it. You won't find it anywhere else. I pronounce it JABBED for jabbed into action, because hopefully learning about what each letter of JABBED means will mean that you are jabbed, goaded, if you will, into action based on all of what it entails. So let's go ahead and break that down. JABBED is an acronym for justice, accessibility, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity. Not always necessarily in that order, but somewhat. That's the acronym. And we're going to talk about each of these this evening and what it can mean for your branch. So we start with justice. And this definition is based both on my own wording and understanding of justice, as well as the AAUW Diversity Toolkit on the national website. If you have not checked out that toolkit yet, I urge you to do so. You will find definitions of justice and nearly all of the concepts I talk about today. And I'll show you the link, and it'll appear in the chat pane, or the questions, yes, in the chat pane in just a moment as well, more than once, because I really urge you to check it out and see what all of the resources there are there to help you be jabbed and to implement it into your branches. So we start with justice, and I define justice as everyone having all existing opportunities and resources to thrive available to them, no matter their social identity or social location. So that's a lot of words, I know. What it really means is that everything that is available to advance somebody's social status, to make sure they're not just surviving but thriving in our nation, that it should be available to all, no matter their identity, no matter their ethnicity, their race, their class, their gender. They should be able to thrive with all of the same resources as anybody else and all of the same opportunities. So that's the ultimate goal. That's why we do this work in AAUW. That's why all social justice organizations do what they do. So why do I lead jabbed with it? Why is it the first letter? Because I think this is also the goal that we most often lose sight of. We're so focused on the diversity aspect, or maybe on accessibility, or being inclusive, that we forget that the end goal is really justice, that that's what the ultimate aim, at least in the long term, is for AAUW and all of our branches. AAUW is a social justice organization. I think we lose sight of that, but it is, because it is focused on people having all opportunities and resources to thrive available to them, no matter their gender identity. That's the social identity and social location that historically, and by our mission, we're focused on. That gender identity should not stop anyone from being able to thrive in our nation. So how can AAUW branches practice justice? I'm going to go back for a moment before I share with you my ideas, although you might have already caught a glimpse of them. I would like to ask you, those of you who are here today, if you can share in the questions panel some ideas for how AAUW as a whole, or your AAUW branch, can practice or promote justice, social justice. Any ideas? Shall I go ahead and read them?
Sure. If you have access, go ahead.
Great. So we have focus programs and presenters on this topic. Yes, that's great. On justice specifically, I'd love to hear more about what kinds of programs and presenters specifically that might be. An example, organize or attend marches that fit with the AAUW mission. Yes. So there's the Women's March. There are Women's March organizations throughout the country. There have been marches for reproductive rights. Those could fit in with our AAUW mission. Our branch promotes social justice by honoring each member's languages. That's wonderful. So language justice, indeed, is a way to practice justice within the organization. So I'm guessing you do that with interpreters for different languages and translation as well of written materials. Vote for removing the degree requirement from AAUW membership. Yes, and that goes along with some of the other aspects of JABD as well. That's another way to practice justice, particularly economic or socioeconomic justice. Show short films about DEI and have a discussion on what they see and how we can do better. Oh, they being the membership, yes. So DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion. It's the acronym or the letters you most often hear in relation to this work. I made it longer because in doing this work, I've heard all of these concepts come up: justice, accessibility, belonging, in addition to equity, inclusion, and diversity, or diversity, equity, inclusion. So short films and discussion, yes, I think that starts to move towards justice, but it may not actually be justice in action, right? But that is a step towards showing DEI-related films and discussing them. All right. We've got more. Actively support and partner with other nonprofit organizations that are focused on justice. Great. It's also a way to promote the other aspects of JABD as well. Advocate for the start of a commission on women and girls. This was in Long Beach specifically. That's great. Yes, that's really related to social justice. Programs that enable members to hear from young people who, I think that one got cut off, from young people who experience, I'm guessing injustice. Young people experience injustices, and that's good as well. To promote justice, you have to learn about the current injustices. Scholarships to make more equitable entrance to college, completion of college, return to college. Yes, that's equity and justice. Partner with local organizations that support marginalized populations, went along with a previous suggestion. Great. Young people experience discrimination. I said injustices earlier, but very much related. Have ongoing difficult conversations centered around DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and bring a focus on the national MMIW crisis. Sorry, I need some help with that. Yes, bringing the attention to the injustices can start to lead to justice. It's not just practicing justice just yet, but it's getting there. Celebrating different holidays, same thing. It's moving towards justice. It's not quite justice in action yet, but it's a step in very much the right direction. Reentry scholarships for those who couldn't complete their education. Voter registration. Oh, missing and murdered Indigenous women. Thank you. Yes, definitely. That is a social justice issue. So you might see that when you're practicing justice, it goes beyond your organization or beyond the branch, right? It's trying to correct an injustice on a larger societal scale. Very good. All right. So always keep that larger goal in mind. So here are the ones that I had. You all came up with some great ones. You have a lot more. I have focus on addressing local injustices based on gender identity, and several of you had very specific examples related to that, which is great. Here it is again, the link to AAUW's Diversity Toolkit. Become familiar with that to understand how we are a social justice organization, right? This is one of, again, those moves towards justice. The link, if you look at it, tells you exactly which page to go to find the toolkit. You start with the national website, then you go to the resources page, member or membership, governance and tools, and then under governance and tools is that great resource of the DEI toolkit. And incorporate the word justice into the branch's mission and purpose, informally, if not formally. Have that larger societal vision. of addressing injustices in your mission. Remember, our national mission is to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. The word used is equity, but when you're advancing that gender equity, you are also practicing justice. So think about that with your mission. So the next letter is A in JABBed, and A is for accessibility. What is accessibility? Accessibility is related to availability, but availability tends to be a more generalized term. We talk about our scheduling availability and things like that, but accessibility is really about whether the opportunities and resources needed to thrive, going back to the definition of justice, whether they are available. How available are they? Are they available to everyone? Are they easily accessible to everyone? If not, how can you make them so? So these are the questions that come up with accessibility. And I chose this picture, this image, intentionally for this because it is an example of inaccessibility, really. And I think it's kind of obvious here. But for those of us who are able-bodied, for those of us for whom stairs are accessible, or really the next level up of something, whatever it is, literally or metaphorically, if it's accessible to us through stairs, then we may not always think about physical accessibility, whereas those who can't climb stairs for whatever reason, even temporarily, this will not be accessible to them. The next floor, moving up, leveling up, thriving, it won't be accessible unless it's made accessible through a ramp, an elevator, an escalators, right, some way around traditional stairs. So I thought that image said a lot for accessibility. So before I reveal my ideas for accessibility, I would like to hear from you in the question and answer panel again on ways that AAUW or your specific branches can be more accessible. Ideas? Hybrid meetings, great. So hybrid meaning, right, available virtually like this one, online, but also in person. It's a great way to practice accessibility. Again, remove the degree requirement for membership. Yes, it could be more accessible to more people, more members, those who do not have an associate's degree or higher. Hold meetings in different venues, yes. And of course, making sure those venues are ADA compliant. The American Disability Association. Use more social media formats, yes, which can make it our AAUW organization branches more accessible to some, maybe less accessible to others. So using a variety of different formats to get the word out for publicity is important. Time of day, yes. The time of day of meetings is important for accessibility as well, for those who work, those who don't work. Provide written streaming for deaf, yes, closed captioning, also an important way to practice accessibility. And that can be an advantage of having virtual meetings because you can often turn on closed captioning in that way. And there's also channels for interpreters as well for other languages, because language justice came up earlier, which is also related to accessibility. Make sure people have rides if they do not or cannot drive. Excellent, yes. Yes, and that relates to some of my ideas as well. There's another one related to transportation, making sure members have transportation for meetings, record meetings with closed captioning, all very much related and great ways to practice accessibility. And I see that some branches are already doing that, which is excellent. Mine are very close to yours. I have make sure meetings are held in ADA compliant locations, open to the public, and on public transportation routes. So that relates to transportation as well. We don't all have great public transportation where we live, but if you do, take advantage of that to make your meetings accessible. Have most meetings be free or open to attendance regardless of ability to pay admission is something to consider. If not for all meetings, then at least some. I know in Santa Maria, we've been having more and more meetings or programs at the public library. It's on the public transportation route. It's free and open to the public. And there's no cost, right, involved, usually in renting a room there as well. It's not even really renting. So that's a way to be more accessible. Provide language interpretation, which some of you brought up, including American Sign Language, if possible, or closed captioning in all meetings. May require grants for language justice that your branch might look into locally. Present and communicate material in multiple ways and modalities. That gets back to the media formats, social media or otherwise, that your publicity is going out in. Think about doing that in multiple formats. And vote to remove the college degree requirement for membership. Repeat it again, yes. So that's been there several times for accessibility. And this goes into socioeconomic and class accessibility, educational accessibility as well. All right. The B is belonging. Now, that I admit, I put it in where I did in JABBed because it worked well in the acronym. Belonging usually comes later. It comes after a lot of these other aspects of JABBed. But it's really important, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. And it's different from inclusion, which we'll talk about later. Belonging means the members themselves, your membership, they feel not just included, not just invited, but fully accepted, valued, and appreciated in the specific context of your programs, your meetings, in your organization as a whole. So belonging is more of an internal feeling. But if members don't feel like they belong, they won't stay. And I know this has come up in other AUW DEI forums as well, right? You can invite folks, but if they come and they don't feel like they belong, then they likely won't join the organization, likely won't come back or won't become a member and won't tell others in their community as well. So belonging is really important. And I'd like to ask you now, I think you know the pattern. How could your branch or AUW as a whole practice belonging? Monthly wine and wine meetings where you don't have to drink wine. Thank you. That is important for belonging because, of course, not everyone drinks or enjoys wine, or they may not be able to for a number of different reasons. It's agenda-free, the monthly wine and wine meetings, agenda-free, and everyone is invited with no expectations. Excellent. We call members and make sure they join at least one interest group so that they can meet members and make friends. And I'm assuming that's after the wine and wine meetings. So nice, nice. Agenda-free can be good, at least in the start for belonging. Talk to new members. Yes, don't just invite them. But when they arrive, talk to them, right? Make them feel welcome. Invest in name tags. Yes, that's important. Learn each other's names. Mentor new members, accompanying them to interest sections and general meetings. Yeah, that's great. So don't just leave them to do it themselves, right? Maybe after that wine and wine meeting, you actually go with them and you accompany them. That's great. And maybe different established members take turns accompanying the new members to these events. That's very good. Connect with each new member individually and hold a monthly new member meeting. Yeah, that's great. Just for new members. That's a great idea. And connecting with them individually. And there again, when you connect, consider different ways to connect. Consider accessibility. Acknowledge unknown persons when you come into a meeting. Speak after the meeting to these persons. Very good. Yeah, if you don't know somebody, go introduce yourself. I guarantee it's less scary for you than it is for them if they're brand new and they don't know anybody. And then, yeah, follow up with them after the meeting. Oh, you do interest groups and wine meetings in tandem. So good, together. Icebreakers, yes. Icebreakers for all. So everybody is breaking the ice together and getting to know one another. Recognize birthdays, yes. Yes and no. I mean, it can be uncomfortable for some people, of course, and as long as your branch is recognizing that, I think that can be a great way. Some people do not want, right, their birthdays recognized, or it's just not part of their cultural belonging. Connect a new member with an existing member who can accompany them to a meeting or out to lunch. That's great. It's another great one. Yes, it's all about building those connections, right? And building them on the terms of the new members. Belonging involves being in charge of groups and supporting them. In charge. I'd be interested in hearing more about that later. What exactly that might mean in terms of belonging. Speak to the speaker before, after the meeting. Yes, so if you invite a speaker who's not familiar with your group or is not a member, connect with them before and after. Belonging sounds a lot like inclusion. What's the difference? I will talk about this more in a moment, but inclusion, right, is being invited to the table, and belonging is that person who's been invited feels like they're really welcome there, that their voice, their presence means something, is valued. That's the difference. They go hand in hand, but they're not quite the same thing. Poll members as to their interests and hobbies, connect them with other members or groups of similar interests. That's great. Yeah, maybe a member interest form, a new member form, right? I've heard of branches doing this, having a new member interest form, which can be polling or just getting to know them, right? Getting out of your comfort zone of always being with friends by making more of an effort to sit and get to know new members, or even members who've been in the organization for a while but do not regularly attend meetings. Yes, yes. So belonging is not just important for new members, right? But for the members you already have. I guarantee there's always something new you can learn about your current membership. Excellent, excellent. So all of these go along, they go right along with my ideas. Actually, what was just said in the question panel relates to this. Focus on retention as much as recruitment, right? So again, it's not just about inviting them and not just saying, look at our room, look at all the diversity in the room. Just because they all are there in the room at the moment doesn't mean that everyone feels like they really belong there. So that's where retention becomes as important as recruitment with members. Practice cultural humility. This is a big one for me that I tend to present on a lot. I'm going to try to summarize, condense that presentation here very quickly. Cultural humility is different from cultural competence, right? Because cultural humility is saying, I'm not going to pretend to know about a culture that I don't actually belong to or practice, but I'm going to give you the opportunity, you who are of general you, who are of a different community, a different culture, a different social location or identity. I'm going to give you the opportunity to express that on your terms. And that's cultural humility. I'm not going to assume to know what your culture is, how you want to express it. I am going to sit back and give you the opportunity to express your identity on your terms. So along with that goes pronouncing and spelling members' names as they would like them pronounced and spelled, not how you think they should be, even if you know the language the name comes from. That's part of cultural humility and allowing someone to express their cultural identity on their terms. If they pronounce their name a certain way, even if it's different from how you learned it, you should pronounce it that way and also spell it that way. And this is where name tags that someone brought up helps. Share origin stories. I say origin stories instead of asking someone, where are you from? Which can be a loaded question. I know it always has been for me because I'm from the United States. I've grown up in different parts of this country. I was born here, but usually when people ask me that question, that's not what they mean. So I say, share origin stories. And this is a great group activity for any organization. I recommend it for workplaces as well. You set aside a time. This can be an icebreaker activity as well, where everyone maybe shares an object, shares a reading quote or passage, a favorite quote or passage, or they share a story related to a theme that applies to everyone. Maybe the theme is water, and everyone has to share a story that has meaning for them and their identity and who they are related to water. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's clothing. Maybe the object is something from your desk that has meaning and significance to you, or something from home. Or you ask everyone to bring in that favorite quote or reading passage. And in talking about what these things mean, you get to find out about people on their terms rather than on yours by asking, share your culture, where are you from, or what is your ethnicity? When you're sharing origin stories, or you're talking about a culture that's not your own, not that anyone owns a culture, but if you're talking about a culture you didn't grow up in, or you didn't grow up practicing, then I think it's really important when you're talking about that culture that you share your sources. I know cite sources sounds really academic, but it's more about saying, this is how I learned what I'm sharing with you. But if you learned something different, I'm going to give you the space and the time and honor that you know this culture differently from experience, and you can share that. I bring this up for me with yoga and yoga instructors. My parents are from India. I'm South Asian American. I grew up Hindu. And I hear yoga instructors who are not South Asian and not Hindu talk about Hinduism and Indian culture as if they're experts and authorities on it because they teach yoga. And this is where I would love for them to cite their sources and share how they learned what they're sharing with me. I also am a Spanish teacher, more on a part-time and volunteer basis now, but I used to be full-time, and I've studied in Costa Rica. But I'm not Latina. And so it's important for me when I'm teaching a new group of students Spanish that I share my origin story of how I came to learn Spanish and how I came to learn about Latin American culture. And then I say, I'm still learning. I'm not an expert. This is not my culture. This is not my language. And if I say something that's different than what you learned, because you are Latina, raise your hand. Interrupt me. Tell me what you know that's different. And then we learn together, and you're expressing your culture on your terms, and I'm giving you the space and time and value to do that. And by doing that, I am seeing and treating students, but in this case, maybe you are seeing and treating members for who they are, not what they represent or what you think they represent. In fact, you're treating everyone as individuals and giving them the time and space to be an individual and feel like they belong because of that, because of who they are and not what you believe or assume that they represent. So thanks for indulging me a little bit longer there, because I think cultural humility and belonging are really important, and we don't talk about it enough. On to the E, equity. Equity is different from equality. And you might know this, but I always still have to remind myself, what's the difference? You may have seen, I know it's been shared in AAUW DEI circles, and in many other forums, the image of 3 people of different heights trying to look over a fence or a gate. And for equality, equality is already part of the diagram, right? They all are dealing with the same gate, the same barrier, really, and it has holes in it, right? It's the wire chain link or wire gate. So they're all able to see the baseball field through the fence. That's equality. They can all see, but the person who's tall enough to look over the gate or fence is able to see better than anybody else. So it's not equitable, it's equal. They're all dealing with the same fence, but it's not equitable in that some can see better over the fence than others. That image has become a little bit contested. Maybe contested is too strong a word, but it's been debated because really there should be no gate at all. And that's justice. And that's fairness. Some people refer to justice more in terms of fairness. So I like to think of equity and equality more in terms of shoes. And I only started thinking about it this way because when I first made this PowerPoint slideshow, PowerPoint suggests all these designs for your slides. And so when I just clicked a button, right, and said, okay, what are the different design ideas for equity? And this came up, and I thought, I really like this. Because here's the equality of it. We all need shoes. At some point in our lives, we all have to wear footwear. We all need shoes. Even though my older daughter, who's now 14, tried to go barefoot for as long as possible in California, and she could do that. But eventually she too needed to wear shoes. So equality would say, we're going to give everybody shoes because everybody needs shoes. But the shoes are all going to be the same size. They're all going to be the same style. That's equality. Everyone is equal now. They all have the exact same pair of shoes. The exact same pair of shoes is not going to work for everybody, as we well know. We all need different size shoes. We need different style shoes, different kinds of shoes for different weather. And that's when equity comes in. We don't just all need shoes. We need the shoes that fit us and that are appropriate for the weather and appropriate for context. And that's where equity comes in. So equity is having the right fit for you to be able to thrive, no matter your social identity or location. Equality is just everybody has the same thing, whether it works for them or not. Another example I found online that I really liked is this one, where everybody's given the same bicycle. That's equality. But of course, not everyone can ride it. Only this person on the top with the long hair can ride it. But equity is everybody gets the bike they need. And of course, every bike is different depending on what a person needs to thrive. So that's the difference between equality and equity. So now, of course, it's your turn. I'm going to ask you, how can AAUW and your branches practice not just equality, but equity? And some of this might overlap with answers you've given me before or that you've shared before, because all of these certainly are connected and go hand in hand. If you're thinking of a lot of the same things that you thought of for accessibility, that's great. because actually they go hand in hand. Yeah, pay what you can for membership or membership dues versus a fixed ticket price. Yes, that's equity. And maybe some members can afford to pay the membership for others. And it might differ in different years. Great. It's a great example of equity. Or for events, yes, same thing, right? A sliding scale or sliding fees or rates for events and programs as well. That's important. I think especially now with the waning pandemic and gas prices and all of that, which is another reason to go hybrid as well whenever you can. The rising cost of food, that alone. Any other ideas? Well, those are great ones. And I have some related ones. Oh, here comes another. Spread out location choices to encompass entire branch area. That's a really good one. I hadn't thought of that. So if your branch covers a large region, a lot of our branches do, right? Have your meetings in different places. That's also a way to be more accessible. So you're closer to different members, kind of a rotating venue. Very good. Try to accommodate working people in a meeting times. Yes. And that goes hand in hand with accessibility again too, right? What time are your meetings? And everyone has different working schedules. I've even talked to a branch about possibly having the same type of meeting at 2 different times. Like maybe the board meeting, maybe the board has the same agenda, and one person, a different person every month goes to both meetings, but you have it at different times for different schedules. And then you merge the discussion later, the notes from both meetings. So equity, again, hybrid meetings and programs, both online and in person. For me, when my children were younger, this was important to me and didn't always happen. Having childcare or family-friendly programming is also a way to practice equity and accessibility. Having foods everyone can eat and drinks everyone can drink, that goes along with belonging as well, right? Making sure that different diets and dietary restrictions and preferences are accommodated. Sliding or variable membership dues, which was brought up in the question panel, great. And a variety of options for being involved, interest groups and member benefits, which came up earlier as well. So not everyone's going to be interested in the same things, right? But if you have a variety based on people's needs and their interests and desires, then you can practice equity and also inclusion and belonging for your members, and the different benefits as well, right? Some benefits work for some and they don't work for others. Great. Now we get to inclusion. I know it's a really long definition, but it boils down to what I said earlier in relation to belonging, that inclusion is making sure that those who have traditionally been excluded, or I say here, historically not had resources or opportunities because of their social identity or social location. Social location's about the same as social identity, but relates more to status, according to our society. Making sure they know they're invited. That you want them to be there. You want not just them, but us to come and to participate, and that they can benefit too from the event or the program or the branch or organization as a whole. So that's inclusion. But of course, just because someone's invited doesn't mean they feel like they belong. So, ideas for being inclusive or practicing inclusion. I think some ideas came up with accessibility too. Partnering with other organizations. Yes, ask other groups how AAUW can support them. I really like that because it shows humility as well, right? You're doing things not just on your branches or AAUW's terms, but the other organizations. So say, how can we support you? And then it doesn't just seem like it's about membership, right? Which it shouldn't just be about membership. It's about the social justice, right? Asking how AAUW can support another organization, and that's being inclusive. I really like that. Other ideas? Reaching out to underrepresented schools for Tech Trek applicants. Excellent. Yes. Yes, that's a great way. Invite them to participate in AAUW activities. Definitely. And that's another advantage of having activities that are accessible in public locations like the public library or a park. Great ideas. So here are mine that go right along with yours. Invite members of historically underrepresented communities or organizations to a program, meeting, or to join us as members. Sponsor their membership, and this can go along with equity as well, right? If you are able to pay for a new member's membership, maybe for the first year, or the organization is, consider doing that. Ask them, and this goes along with the earlier idea, ask them as in the community that's underrepresented or the other organization to plan and conduct a program or a meeting. And they choose the venue, perhaps, and you have to go to them. Make sure they have opportunities, they again being members of historically underrepresented groups, making sure they have opportunities to share their perspectives on branch decisions or activities affecting the branch or community at large. And this is where asking, how can we support you, can really come into play. So that they're not just invited, right, but they have a voice and they feel like they belong. And then this goes along with sponsoring, helping them advance to leadership positions in the branch so that they can really incorporate, implement, lead, and execute new ideas, transformative ideas, and social change. All right, so we're on the last one now, diversity, jabbed. The D is diversity. I end with diversity because I feel like the term is so overused now, and there are other scholars of this work who feel similarly, scholars and practitioners, that diversity has become so much the lead term and so overused that it's become diluted. And there are college students now just saying, oh, look at the diversity in the room because everyone has a different backpack. Everyone has a different style. Everyone has a different fashion. We're such a diverse group. Well, yes, that is a kind of diversity. But when we're talking about social justice, when we're talking about society, diversity really has to have a social meaning and social impact, which is why I talk so much about social identities and social locations. So diversity to me is, and this is based on partly on a dictionary definition as well, diversity is an appreciation of humanity's full range of social identities and social locations, especially, again, those identities and locations that have been historically marginalized or historically excluded, that are not the majority. That is really what diversity for any group should be about, right? Having more representation from groups that have been historically excluded or marginalized. So, last time I'll ask you to share in this way. What are ways that your branch or AUW as a whole can promote more diversity, can be more diverse? Ideas? Yes, that's true. Promoting diversity and being more diverse are different concepts. You are correct. So let's go with being more diverse. Promoting diversity within the organization, as in having more diverse membership and representation. Have theme of diversity in general programs during the year, yes. Have the theme, and rhetorical question, but how would you implement it, right? The theme, how would you follow it or fulfill it? Have members from different racial and cultural backgrounds, those with different sexual identities, socioeconomic groups, indeed. Excellent. But then there's the question, right, of which goes back to inclusion and accessibility and equity, belonging. Where do you find, how do you get those members? And then you can go back to some of the ideas shared earlier. Discontinue the use of heteronormative language and assumptions, definitely, so that it's not always about not just the gender binary, right, but about husband, wife, man, woman, assuming that those are the relationships and the language that applies to everybody, right? As you may have noticed, there are many people who do not use husband and wife in relation to their significant other, whether it's a heterosexual relationship or not, but they use, I tend to use spouse, but partner is also used. And so that's getting away from heteronormative language. In part, there's a lot more to it. Do all of the earlier actions? Yes, everything suggested before, all good ways to be more diverse. Create interest groups where the focus is to learn something new about world cultures, member-led. Yes, and maybe you share origin stories in that context. But always with cultural humility, yes? Unless it's, your own culture. Even there, you can practice cultural humility. Outreach for developing shared programming with other organizations that may be more diverse than one's branch. Yes. Locally, we've been doing more with Women's March, Santa Maria Valley. And the Cultural and Creative Arts Center of Santa Maria Valley, Corazón del Pueblo, which is a mostly Latina organization. And so those are ways that we have been trying to promote, support diversity, and support it as an organization. Hasn't led quite to more diverse membership yet, but that's a long-term goal. Ask for preferred pronouns, definitely, with gender diversity being a gender-affirming organization, and abandon the tourist mentality when it comes to celebrating different cultures. Yes. How do I explain the tourist mentality? If anyone can help me, please put it in the questions panel. But more that, like, the tourist mentality is kind of exploitative, right? That you're just there to, you don't really want to support or promote the different culture or learn about it on that group's terms. So an example given here, thank you, is international dinners. Oh, yes, where you sample something from every nation. So what might be a good substitute for international dinners instead? So that it's not so much of a tourist sampling of different cultures as an outsider. Ideas? Oh, here's one maybe. Our branch started a diversity in dining section where we try different ethnic restaurants just for fun. Okay, so focus on one ethnicity or one ethnicity's foods, and also starting a book section to read books with themes of diversity. Yes, very good. And then maybe inviting others, not just of that ethnicity, but outside of it, to join you for some of those. Yes, the tourist mentality of, from someone within the culture saying, you are visiting to the tourist, but I live here, right? Which relates to me very much to cultural humility. Americanized versions of culture can also relate to the tourist mentality, as like Cinco de Mayo, which actually is only celebrated in one specific location in Mexico, and certainly not the way we celebrate it here. And it is not Mexican Independence Day. So yes, learning about others' cultures on their terms and allowing them to express it will go against the tourist mentality. Food is the starting point. It often can be, as long as there are, foods for everybody that everyone can eat. Comparing traditions related to coming of age with girls. Yes. That I think requires a level of trust and rapport. There are some coming of age traditions in certain cultures that could be painful to share, could be criticized by other cultures. And so that might be one where, when there's a lot of trust and belonging already established in a group, that might be a good discussion to have. Cooking demos with the cook describing their origin story. I love that. That's great. And then, of course, making that accessible by maybe doing it hybrid, by maybe providing the ingredients, or at least some of them, to everyone, or at least the list of ingredients, having the recipe written out too. Very good. Yes, you have to have people who represent different cultures before they can tell their culture's stories. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Unless, again, you're partnering with a different organization representing a different culture. And then maybe if it's not within your own membership, that can be a way to start sharing stories, even if your membership is not very diverse yet. So great ideas. Here's some more ideas to consider when practicing diversity. First, and I have to remind myself of this too, because diversity can seem like such a challenge, but it's really an asset. It's a strength. And so I think it benefits us and our organizations to consistently remind ourselves that diversity is an asset. It's a strength. Everyone benefits from it. Everybody. The organization is strengthened. And so it's not just a deficit or a challenge. It's something that ultimately makes the organization more relevant and helps the organization thrive as well as its members. And then this is something I've been recommending to more and more organizations and groups, is to actually set a specific goal, like a SMART goal, right? Another acronym there: specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant, I think, and timely, or a timeline. Set a specific goal, maybe the board does, for your branch's demographics, your membership, to, at some point in the long term, it's not going to happen quickly, right, or overnight, to reflect the demographics of your community. Now, I know there are many, many different communities represented here, so I didn't, try to look up and give the demographics for all of the communities that you represent here today. But since this is an AUW California webinar, I thought I would go with the demographics for California. You can easily look up the demographics for where you live online, on the internet. You can look at the World Almanac. You can look at the census, of course, and the most recent census is the 2020 census. And these are the demographics for California as a state. Average age in California is 36.7. Average income is approximately $41,276 for an individual, and almost double that, little over double that for a household, $84,097. $84,097. Goodness, I don't know why I'm saying it like that. I'm thinking dollars and cents. Gender, 50% female, exactly half. But in an organization that's focused on justice that's based on gender, you may want to be more than 50% female. So you can decide as a branch and a board how much you want to reflect for your area's demographics, and how much you may not, depending on your group's needs and your wants, or members' desires as far as diversity. Household composition, family formation in California, 2.92 persons per household, right? Almost 3. How about your members? What's their household composition? Bachelor's degree or higher, of course, this gets into our membership requirements on a national scale. But I was surprised, honestly, to find out that only 35.3%, only about a third of California's population has a bachelor's degree or higher, which makes a case for changing our membership requirements. Language, 44% of Californians, maybe not entirely surprising, speak a language other than English at home. That doesn't mean they don't also speak English at home, but they speak another language as well, which gets into language justice and accessibility and language diversity. So think about your branch and how close you come to these characteristics, or the characteristics for your community. And then you can set a diversity goal and then talk about how you're going to implement those other aspects of JAB to start meeting those goals in the long term. I'd say at least 2 years from now, if not longer. Those are my ideas. And I am now happy to answer questions. Before I do, however, I have a request for all of you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen as I make this request. So tomorrow is my birthday, and the best gift you could all give me, if you choose to give me a gift, is to make some sort of commitment as an individual or in terms of your branch that's related to JABD. It could be investment of time, investment of money into DEI activities for your branch or into a local organization that you'd like to partner with or support in their social justice or JABD efforts. But something, and if you'd like to tell me what your commitment is or what you've already done in the next year or so, because I won't have another birthday for a year, so you've got some time. I don't know if you have my contact information, but I don't mind, Stormy or others, if you share it, but let me know. Let me know what you're doing or what you've done or what you will do related to this. And if you're looking for an idea or an organization to support, I would like to tell you about an organization that's near and dear to my heart, and that I volunteer for. And hopefully you can all see this. Yes, I'm sharing again. This is a project I started with 3 other volunteers on the central coast of California, so from Monterey County to Ventura County, and it's called Our Roots, Our Routes, and we are creating a digital archive of origin stories, basically. We are doing oral history interviews and documenting the cultural practices of ethnic, immigrant, and indigenous groups on the Central Coast so that their stories, their experiences are not lost, and so that we can all learn from them. And so I've been doing a lot of interviews and learning so much from people, and also taking videos and photographs of different communities at their cultural celebrations, cultural events. And the digital archive is yet to be built. That's part of why we're seeking funding, but it should be publicly accessible, in about a year or so. We're still, as volunteers, collecting all the material for it. So there is a link to donate. Every little bit helps. Even $5 helps with transcribing an interview, an automated transcript for this project. But if you're not able to donate, or you'd rather not donate money, but you know of somebody on the Central Coast who would like to be interviewed or would like to have their cultural event or celebration documented, please let me know. That's a great contribution as well to not just this project, but to JABD. And then everyone can access the digital archive in the end. So thank you for indulging that and thinking about it. I'll stop sharing. And I know there were some questions sent ahead of time. Should I start with those, or should...
Yeah, I think we have enough time maybe to address maybe 2 of them before we close out. And then what we can certainly do is for those that submitted questions in advance, or if you have other questions for us that you'd like to populate into the Q&A, we can certainly take the time to address those and get and respond back out to attendees and or to participants, if that's okay.
Sure. And I see some questions already in the questions panel, but I'll start with a couple that were submitted ahead of time that we didn't already address together as a group. Are individual speakers or panel discussions better for sparking interest in the diverse populations we'd like to have in AAUW? It's a great question, but I don't think it has just one answer. I think it's a really case-by-case basis, and it depends on the topic and the speakers or speaker. And this is where I would say maybe some cultural humility can come in, and you can ask the speaker. what they think would be best. If you have a speaker or a group in mind, I would say ask them what they think. Speaker or panel discussion. Is there someone else they would like to invite to speak with them? Someone they would like you not to invite to speak with them. And I think that's a great way of collaboratively organizing and being inclusive as well. And there was also the question of how to refer to the group of folks who are overrepresented. And some examples given are whites, Caucasians, colonialists, non-POC. I mean, everyone has a different preference, but speaking as a sociologist and a practitioner of this work of JAB, I would say I usually use white Americans, but only if I'm referring to race. Otherwise, as I said earlier, I use majority, with majority not just being about numbers, but about who has historically had more power, had more advantages, and more wealth as well. And that then encompasses really all aspects of being marginalized, minoritized, or excluded when you say the majority. But if you're referring specifically to race, I think saying whites or white Americans is fine, as we refer to other groups by sometimes skin color, sometimes racial categories based on geography. So I'll stop there. And if I didn't get to your pre-submitted question, you could put it in the chat or the questions panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martine. We are making sure that we're capturing all of the questions and responses into the Q&A or what may come into the chat, and we'll be sure to communicate that out. There will be, so this will be posted. The recording will be posted on the AUW California website. I imagine it will also make an appearance in terms of a resource in the upcoming board to board and other spaces as well. And we want to make sure that we're staying in communication with you all. I think we've learned so much this evening. I know that there are great nuggets that we can take back to our local branches or individually and really process the way in which we engage in justice, accessibility, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity. And just know that this should be, if some of these concepts are new for you, I'm hoping that this is just, as Dr. Murphy was speaking to, as that birthday gift, that we're thinking more about the ways that we can embrace this and embody this. And certainly we want to make sure that you have Dr. Murphy's information. The email address has been populated into the chat and the Q&A. So you have the invitation to reach out directly. I want to let you know that as a birthday gift, personally, I would love to donate to our roots. Thank you for the work that you're doing in support of the community. You're much appreciated. And we hope that we get to engage in this conversation with you again. Once again, we appreciate you all for being here this evening for our second DEI statewide chat. I do believe that there's a standard survey that goes out following our webinars with AUW California. So it's really helpful to hear from you on ways that we can continue the conversation, mostly in support of what you need, and whether that be resources or continuing the conversation around DEI specifically. How can we support you? And yeah, do respond and do reach out to us directly. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and close this out for the evening.